There comes a moment in your life when the noise gets so loud that you can't even hear your own spirit breathe. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody has a timeline for you. Everybody has something to say about what you should be doing, how you should be moving, and who you should be becoming. And in the middle of all that chaos, God leans in, not with thunder, not with applause, but with a whisper that cuts through everything. Focus on yourself and stay silent. And stay silent. Now I know that doesn't sound like the message we're used to. We've been taught to defend ourselves, to explain ourselves, to prove ourselves. We've been conditioned to think that if we don't speak up, we'll be overlooked. If we don't react, we'll be misunderstood. But what if the very thing God is calling you to do in this season is not to perform, but to transform? What if your silence is not weakness, but strategy? What if your focus is not selfish, but sacred? See, some of you have been pouring into places that God already told you to walk away from. You've been explaining yourself to people who were never assigned to understand you. You've been fighting battles that were never yours to win. And all the while, your purpose has been waiting on the other side of your obedience, waiting on the other side of your discipline, waiting on the other side of your silence. Because when God tells you to focus on yourself, He's not telling you to ignore the world. He's telling you to realign with Him. He's calling you back to the version of you that doesn't need validation to feel valuable. He's calling you into a space where your identity is not shaped by opinions, but anchored in purpose. And when He tells you to stay silent, it's not because you don't have something to say. It's because He's doing something in you that words would only interrupt. There is a power in being misunderstood when you know you're in alignment. There is a strength in being overlooked when you know you're being prepared. And there is a grace that covers you when you stop trying to prove your worth and start walking in it. So today, I need you to lean in, not to the noise, not to the pressure, not to the expectations, but to that still small voice that's been trying to get your attention. Because this message is not for everybody. This is for the one who's tired of explaining, tired of performing, tired of shrinking, just to fit into spaces they've already outgrown. God is saying, this is your season to focus. This is your season to be still. This is your season to become. Silence is not weakness. It is divine strategy. And yet so many of us have been conditioned to believe the opposite. We have been taught that if we are not speaking, we are losing. If we are not defending ourselves, we are surrendering. If we are not constantly proving our worth, then somehow we are falling behind. But there is a deeper wisdom, a sacred rhythm that God introduces when He calls you into silence. And it does not look like defeat. It looks like preparation. It looks like restraint. It looks like a power that refuses to be wasted on noise that cannot carry your purpose forward. Because the truth is, not every situation deserves your voice. Not every misunderstanding requires your correction. Not every accusation needs your defense. There are moments when responding would feel good in your flesh, but it would cost you in your spirit. And God, in His infinite understanding, begins to teach you how to discern the difference between what is urgent and what is necessary. Silence becomes the filter. Silence becomes the boundary. Silence becomes the space where your spirit can breathe without the pressure of performance. You have to understand that noise is easy. Reaction is easy. Anybody can speak when they are triggered. Anybody can clap back when they feel disrespected. Anybody can explain themselves when they feel misunderstood, but it takes strength, real, cultivated, disciplined strength to hold your peace when everything in you wants to react. It takes maturity to recognize that just because you have the right to say something does not mean you have the responsibility to say it. And that kind of restraint does not come from weakness. It comes from alignment. There is a version of you that God is developing that cannot afford to be distracted by every voice, every opinion, every misinterpretation. That version of you understands that purpose requires focus, and focus requires boundaries, and boundaries often look like silence. Because every time you speak unnecessarily, you leak energy. Every time you try to correct someone who is committed to misunderstanding you, you delay your own progress. Every time you step into an argument that God never assigned to you, you step out of alignment with what He is trying to build within you. And so God begins to shift your posture. He begins to show you that silence is not about shrinking. It is about sharpening. It is about conserving your energy for the places that actually matter. It is about creating a space where your identity is no longer dependent on being heard, but on being grounded. Because when you know who you are, you don't feel the need to announce it. When you are secure in your calling, you don't feel the need to argue about it. When you are anchored in your purpose, you don't feel the need to convince anyone of your value. Silence also becomes the place where God speaks the loudest. Because when you remove yourself from the chaos, when you step away from the constant need to respond, when you allow the noise to settle, you begin to hear Him more clearly. And what He reveals in that quiet place is often more valuable than anything you could have said in the noise. He gives you clarity. He gives you direction. He gives you insight that no argument could ever produce. But you can only receive that when you are willing to be still. Some of you have been missing your next instruction because you have been too busy trying to have the last word. You have been so focused on being heard by people that you have forgotten how to listen to God. And He is calling you back into that space, not to isolate you, but to elevate you, not to silence you permanently, but to teach you when your voice carries purpose and when it is simply reacting to pressure. Because there is a difference between speaking from purpose and speaking from pain. When you speak from pain, you are trying to release frustration, defend wounds, prove a point. When you speak from purpose, your words carry weight, they carry intention, they carry timing, and silence is what teaches you that difference. Silence is what allows your emotions to settle so that your spirit can lead. Silence is what separates reaction from revelation. And let's be honest, silence is uncomfortable. It will stretch you in ways that you are not used to. It will challenge your ego. It will expose the parts of you that crave validation, that crave recognition, that crave the feeling of being right. But that discomfort is not there to break you. It is there to refine you. Because every time you choose silence over unnecessary reaction, you are strengthening a muscle that will sustain you in higher levels of your life. You cannot carry greater responsibility if you are still reacting to small distractions. You cannot step into deeper purpose if you are still entangled in surface level conflicts. And so God, in His wisdom, begins to train you in silence. He allows situations where you could speak, but He nudges you not to. He allows misunderstandings that you could correct, but He invites you to let go. Not because the truth does not matter, but because your peace matters more in that moment. And what you begin to realize is that silence does not mean you are losing. It often means you are being protected. Protected from saying something you cannot take back. Protected from engaging in something that would drain you. Protected from revealing parts of your process that are not ready to be seen. Because everything that God is doing in you does not need to be announced in real time. Some things need to grow in private before they can stand in public. Silence is also a form of trust. It is you saying, God, I trust you enough to handle what I don't respond to. I trust you enough to defend what I don't explain. I trust you enough to vindicate me without my interference. And that kind of trust shifts your entire posture. It moves you from striving to resting, from controlling to surrendering, from reacting to aligning. And when you begin to live from that place, you will notice a change, not just in your circumstances, but in your spirit. You will feel lighter. You will feel clearer. You will feel less entangled in things that used to consume you, because you are no longer giving your energy to everything that calls for your attention. You are becoming selective. You are becoming intentional. You are becoming disciplined, and that is the strategy. Not loud, not obvious, not performative, but powerful, a quiet strength that does not need to prove itself, a focused mind that does not need to entertain every distraction, a grounded spirit that does not need to respond to every noise. And in that space, God continues to build you, to shape you, to prepare you for what requires more than just your voice. It requires your discipline, your patience, your alignment. Not every battle requires your voice. Some require your discipline. And that truth will challenge everything in you that has been trained to react instead of remain rooted. Because somewhere along the way, you were taught that your voice is your power, that speaking up is how you win, that responding is how you maintain control. And while there is a time for speaking, there is also a season where your growth will demand something deeper than words. It will require discipline, the kind that doesn't always feel satisfying in the moment, but produces strength that lasts far beyond it. You see, battles are not always won by who speaks the loudest, but by who stands the firmest. And standing firm often looks like restraint. It looks like choosing not to engage when you are provoked. It looks like choosing not to explain when you are misunderstood. It looks like choosing not to react when everything in you is being pulled toward a response. That kind of discipline is not passive. It is intentional. It is a decision to protect your peace, your focus, and your purpose at all costs. Because every battle you engage in will cost you something. It will cost you time, energy, attention, emotional capacity. And if you are not careful, you will find yourself depleted, not because life is too hard, but because you are fighting battles that were never assigned to you. You are arguing with people who are not aligned with your purpose. You are trying to prove points that do not move your life forward. You are investing energy into conflicts that do not contribute to your growth. And discipline is what allows you to step back and ask yourself, is this worth it? That question alone can change everything, because discipline teaches you to pause before you react. It teaches you to evaluate before you engage. It teaches you to recognize that just because something is presented to you does not mean it is meant for you. And that awareness becomes your protection. It becomes your filter. It becomes the guard that stands between your peace and unnecessary chaos. There are moments when your voice will feel justified. You will feel like you have every right to speak, every right to defend yourself, every right to correct what has been said about you, and maybe you do. But discipline asks a different question. It doesn't ask, do you have the right? It asks, does this align with who you are becoming? Because the version of you that God is calling forward cannot afford to be reactive. That version of you must be intentional, must be focused, must be able to discern when to speak and when to remain still. And that discernment is not automatic. It is developed. It is built over time through moments where you choose discipline over impulse, moments where you feel the urge to respond, but you hold back, moments where you feel the need to explain, but you release it, moments where you are misunderstood, but you trust that clarity does not always have to come from you. Those moments may feel small, but they are shaping you in ways you cannot yet see. Because discipline is not just about what you do, it is about what you refuse to do. It is about the battles you walk away from. It is about the conversations you choose not to entertain. It is about the energy you decide not to give. And those choices are what create space for your growth. They are what allow you to invest in yourself instead of being constantly distracted by others. Some of you are exhausted not because you are doing too much, but because you are engaging too much. You are responding to everything. You are reacting to everyone. You are allowing every comment, every opinion, every misunderstanding to pull you into a battle. And over time, that constant English, it drains you. It leaves you tired, frustrated, disconnected from your own purpose. And discipline is what breaks that cycle. Discipline teaches you that your peace is more valuable than your need to be right. It teaches you that your growth is more important than your need to be understood. It teaches you that your purpose is bigger than any single moment of conflict. And when you begin to operate from that place, you will notice a shift in how you move. You will become less reactive, less defensive, less consumed by things that used to trigger you. That does not mean you become silent in every situation. It does not mean you never speak, never stand up for your stand, so different. It means you become intentional about when and how you do it. You no longer speak out of impulse. You speak out of alignment. You no longer react out of emotion. You respond out of clarity. And that difference changes everything. Because when your discipline is stronger than your impulse, you gain control over your direction. You are no longer being pulled by every external force. You are no longer being dictated by every situation. You are moving with intention, with purpose, with clarity. And that kind of movement creates stability. It creates a foundation that cannot be easily shaken by temporary circumstances. There will be times when discipline feels like loss. It will feel like you are letting something go, like you are allowing something to go unaddressed, like you are giving up an opportunity to be heard. But what you are actually doing is choosing long-term strength over short-term satisfaction. You are choosing growth over ego. You are choosing alignment over reaction. And in those moments, something powerful is happening beneath the surface. You are building resilience. You are strengthening your ability to stay focused. You are training your mind and your spirit to operate from a place of intention rather than impulse. And that training will carry you into spaces where discipline is not optional. It is necessary. Because as you grow, the stakes become higher. The responsibilities become greater. The distractions become more subtle. And without discipline, it becomes easy to lose focus. It becomes easy to get pulled into things that look important but are not essential. It becomes easy to waste energy on things that do not contribute to your purpose. But when discipline is present, you move differently. You think differently. You engage differently. You begin to recognize that not every battle deserves your voice. Some battles are meant to reveal your discipline. Some situations are meant to show you how far you have come, how much you have grown, how much control you now have over yourself. And that control is not about suppressing who you are. It is about refining it. It is about becoming a version of yourself that is not easily shaken, not easily provoked, not easily distracted. A version of yourself that can stand in the middle of chaos and remain grounded. A version of yourself that does not need to win every argument to know that you are walking in purpose. A version of yourself that understands that sometimes the greatest victory is not in what you say, but in what you choose not to say. Stop explaining yourself to people who were never assigned to understand you. Because there is a difference between being seen and being validated. And too many of us have confused the two. You have spent so much time trying to translate your heart into words that people can accept, trying to package your truth in a way that feels digestible, trying to soften your edges so that others don't feel uncomfortable with your growth. And in the process, you have slowly drifted away from your own authenticity. Not because you didn't know who ye were, but because you kept trying to make who you are make sense to people who were never positioned to receive it. There are people in your life who are not confused about you. They are committed to misunderstanding you. And that commitment has nothing to do with your clarity and everything to do with their capacity. Because understanding requires alignment. It requires openness. It requires a willingness to see beyond assumptions. And not everyone is willing to do that work. Some people have already decided who you are based on who you used to be. Some have already labeled you based on their own limitations. Some are so rooted in their version of you that they cannot make space for the person you are becoming. And yet, you keep explaining, you keep revisiting conversations that drain you. You keep offering clarity where there is no curiosity. You keep trying to prove your intentions to people who have already made up their minds. And what you don't realize is that every time you do that, you are placing your identity in the hands of someone who was never assigned to carry it. You are asking them to validate something that was never meant to be validated by them in the first place. Because your identity is not a group project. It is not something that needs to be voted on, agreed upon, or approved by everyone around you. It is something that is shaped in your private moments, in your relationship with God, in your obedience to what He has placed on your life. And when you understand that, you begin to move differently. You begin to realize that explanation is not always necessary, that clarity is not always owed, that silence in certain situations is not avoidance. It is alignment. It is alignment. There is a kind of freedom that comes when you stop trying to be understood by everyone. It is a release from the constant pressure to justify your decisions, to defend your growth, to make your journey make sense to people who are not walking it. Because the truth is, some of the things God is doing in your life will not make sense to people who are not connected to your calling. Some of the shifts, the changes, the boundaries, the distances, they will look confusing from the outside. And if you spend all your time trying to explain them, you will find yourself stuck in a cycle of over-explaining instead of moving forward. And over-explaining is exhausting. It drains your energy. It pulls you out of your focus. It keeps you anchored in places you were meant to move beyond. Because every explanation requires you to revisit something, to re-engage with something, to reopen something that may have already served its purpose. And when you do that repeatedly, you delay your own progress. You have to learn how to recognize when explanation is productive and when it is performative, when it is actually creating understanding, and when it is simply feeding a need to be accepted. Because those are not the same. One builds connection, the other drains you. One moves you forward, the other keeps you stuck. And the shift begins when you accept that not everyone needs to understand you for your life to make sense. Not everyone needs to agree with you for your path to be valid. Not everyone needs to see your vision for it to be real, because your purpose was not designed for universal approval. It was designed for a specific assignment. There are people who will come into your life who are aligned with where you are going, who can see you clearly, who can understand you without constant explanation, And those are the people who will not require you to shrink, to translate, to over-communicate your worth. But until you stop trying to be understood by everyone, you will not be able to fully recognize the ones who are actually aligned with you. Because when you are constantly explaining yourself, you are often surrounded by people who require that explanation. And that becomes your normal. That becomes your environment. That becomes your standard. But that is not where you are meant to stay. You are meant to grow into spaces where your presence speaks louder than your explanations, where your consistency speaks louder than your defense, where your alignment speaks louder than your words. And that only happens when you stop trying to convince people and start focusing on becoming. There will be moments when you feel misunderstood, when you feel misrepresented, when you feel like people have the wrong idea about you. And that feeling will tempt you to explain, to clarify, to correct. But you have to ask yourself, is this person truly open to understanding? Or am I trying to change a narrative that they have already chosen? Because if someone is truly open, the conversation will feel different. It will feel mutual. And will feel mutual. It will feel respectful. It will feel like both sides are engaged in understanding. But if someone is committed to misunderstanding, no amount of explanation will change that. You can say it 10 different ways. You can break it down. You can simplify it. You can repeat it, and they will still hold on to their version. And that is where you have to make a decision, not about them, but about you, about how much energy you are willing to give, about how much access you are willing to allow, about how much of yourself you are willing to offer in spaces that do not honor your truth. Because every time you over-explain, you are negotiating your worth. You are asking for permission to be who you already are. And you were never meant to live like that. You were never meant to carry the burden of being understood by everyone. You were meant to walk in your purpose, to grow in your calling, to become who God has created you to be, whether or not everyone understands it. And when you finally accept that, something shifts within you. You begin to release the need to justify. You begin to let go of the urge to correct every misunderstanding. You begin to trust that the right people will see you and the wrong people will misunderstand you. And neither of those things will define you. Because at the end of the day, your life is not a presentation. Because at the end of the day, your life is not a presentation. It is not something that needs to be explained in detail to every observer. It is a journey, a process, a calling that is unfolding in ways that are not always visible, not always understandable, not always easy to articulate. And your responsibility is not to make it make sense to everyone. Your responsibility is to remain aligned with it, to stay true to it, to move forward in it without constantly looking back to see who understands and who doesn't. To trust that the same God who placed the vision inside of you did not require a committee to approve it, did not need consensus to confirm it, did not assign your purpose based on public opinion. And when you begin to live from that place, you will find a new kind of peace, a peace that is not dependent on being understood, a peace that is not shaken by misunderstanding, a peace that allows you to move forward without the weight of constant explanation, without the pressure of constant validation, without the need to constantly prove that you are who you say you are. Focusing on yourself is not selfish. It is spiritual alignment. And that truth challenges a mindset that many of us have carried for far too long. Because somewhere along the way, you were taught that putting yourself first meant neglecting others, that prioritizing your growth meant you were becoming distant, that choosing your peace meant you were being inconsiderate. And so you learned how to pour into everyone else while slow, running empty within yourself. You learned how to show up for others while quietly abandoning your own needs. You learned how to give, without ever asking if what you were giving was costing you more than it was building you. But there comes a moment when God begins to interrupt that pattern, not because he wants you to become disconnected from people, but because he wants you to become reconnected with yourself, because you cannot effectively pour into anything if you are depleted. You cannot build anything sustainable if your foundation is unstable. You cannot walk fully in your purpose if you are constantly distracted by everyone else's expectations of you. Focusing on yourself is not about isolation. It is about intention. It is about becoming aware of where your energy is going, where your attention is being pulled, where your time is being invested. And then making the conscious decision to realign those things with what actually matters for your growth. Because without that awareness, it becomes easy to live on autopilot, responding to demands, reacting to situations, meeting expectations, without ever pausing to ask if any of it is truly aligned with who you are becoming. And alignment is everything. Because when you are aligned, your actions reflect your purpose, your decisions reflect your values, your time reflects your priorities. But when you are misaligned, you find yourself busy but unfulfilled, productive but disconnected, present but not fully engaged. You find yourself doing things that look good on the outside but feel empty on the inside. That is why focusing on yourself becomes necessary. It becomes the process of returning to center, of asking yourself the questions that you have been avoiding, of confronting the habits that are holding you back, of addressing the patterns that are keeping you stuck. And that kind of focus requires honesty. It requires you to look at yourself without distraction, without excuses, without the comfort of shifting attention onto others. Because it is easy to focus on what everyone else is doing. It is easy to analyze other people's choices, other people's mistakes, other people's lives. But it is much harder to turn that attention inward and ask, what do I need to change? What do I need to grow? What do I need to release? And yet, that is where transformation begins. Not in comparison, not in criticism, but in self-awareness. And self-awareness is not always comfortable. It will reveal things that you may not want to see. It will expose areas where you have been avoiding responsibility. It will highlight patterns that you have normalized, but that are no longer serving you. But that discomfort is necessary because it is the doorway to growth. You cannot change what you are unwilling to acknowledge. You cannot grow beyond what you refuse to confront. So focusing on yourself becomes an act of courage. It becomes the decision to face yourself honestly, to take ownership of your journey, to become intentional about your growth. And that kind of focus requires boundaries because you cannot fully invest in yourself if you are constantly being pulled in every direction by external demands. Boundaries are not about pushing people away. They are about protecting what matters. They are about creating space for your growth. They are about ensuring that your energy is not being drained by things that do not contribute to your purpose. And sometimes setting those boundaries will feel uncomfortable. It'll feel like you are disappointing people. It will feel like you are changing the dynamic of certain relationships, but that discomfort is often a sign that you are breaking patterns that were never sustainable, because the truth is, not everyone will understand your need to focus on yourself. Some people have benefited from your lack of boundaries. Some people have become accustomed to your constant availability. Some people may even interpret your growth as distance, but your responsibility is not to maintain comfort for others at the expense of your own alignment. Your responsibility is to become who you are called to be. And that requires you to shift your mindset, to stop seeing self-focus as selfishness and start seeing it as stewardship. Because you are responsible for your life, your growth, your purpose. You are responsible for what you do with your time, your energy, your gifts. And if you are constantly giving those things away without intention, you are not being generous. You are being careless with what has been entrusted to you. Focusing on yourself also means investing in your development. It means being intentional about what you consume, what you learn, what you practice. It means choosing growth over comfort, discipline over distraction, progress over approval. And those choices, repeated over time, begin to shape a version of you that is more grounded, more focused, more aligned. It also means learning how to be present with yourself, to sit with your thoughts, your emotions, your experiences, without immediately seeking distraction. Because in that presence, you begin to understand yourself more deeply. You begin to recognize what triggers you, what motivates you, what fulfills you, and that understanding becomes the foundation for intentional living. Because when you know yourself, you move differently. You make decisions with clarity. You set boundaries with confidence. You pursue your purpose with focus. You are no longer easily swayed by external pressures because you are anchored in internal alignment. And that alignment creates a different kind of energy. It creates a sense of peace that is not dependent on external validation. It creates a sense of direction that is not easily disrupted by temporary setbacks. It creates a sense of purpose that keeps you moving forward, even when the path is not clear. And as you continue to focus on yourself, you will begin to notice shifts, not just within you, but around you. Your priorities will change. Your relationships will evolve. Your habits will transform. And while those changes may feel uncomfortable at times, they are often necessary for your growth, because you cannot become who you are meant to be while holding on to everything you used to be. You cannot step into new levels of purpose while maintaining old patterns of behavior. You cannot grow into alignment while remaining attached to misalignment. So focusing on yourself becomes a process of letting go as much as it is a process of building. Letting go of habits that no longer serve you, letting go of expectations that no longer align with you, letting go of roles that no longer reflect who you are becoming. And in that process, you begin to create space. Space for growth, space for clarity, space for purpose, space for the version of you that has been waiting to emerge once you stop being distracted by everything that was never meant to define you. God often does his deepest work in your quiet seasons. In the moments where it feels like nothing is happening, where the noise has faded, where the spotlight has dimmed, and where you are left alone with your thoughts, your questions, and your faith. And if you are not careful, you will misinterpret that quiet as absence. You will assume that because things have slowed down, because opportunities are not as visible, because progress is not as obvious, that somehow God has stepped back from your life. But what feels like stillness on the outside is often the very place where transformation is taking root on the inside. Because God is not limited to movement that can be seen. He is not confined to progress that can be measured by external outcomes. Some of his most significant work happens beneath the surface, in places that are not visible to others, in processes that are not immediately understood. And quiet seasons are often the environment where that kind of work can take place without interruption. In the noise of constant activity, it becomes difficult to hear clearly. It becomes easy to confuse motion with purpose, to mistake busyness for progress, to believe that as long as something is happening, you are moving forward. But quiet seasons disrupt that illusion. They remove the distractions. They slow you down. They create space for reflection, for recalibration, for realignment. And that space can feel uncomfortable because when everything gets quiet, you are no longer able to distract yourself from what is happening within you. You are faced with your thoughts, your habits, your patterns, your fears. You are confronted with areas of your life that you may have been avoiding. And while that confrontation may feel unsettling, it is also necessary because you cannot grow beyond what you refuse to face. Quiet seasons are often where God begins to reshape your foundation. Not the visible parts of your life, not the things that others can see, but the internal structures that support everything else. Your mindset, your character, your discipline, your faith. These are the areas that are being developed in the quiet. And those are the very things that will sustain you when the noise returns. Because there will come a time when things begin to move again. Opportunities will present themselves. Doors will open. Your life will begin to accelerate. And when that happens, what was built in your quiet season will determine how you handle what comes next. If your foundation is strong, you will be able to navigate that movement with clarity and stability. But if your foundation is weak, the very things you prayed for could become overwhelming. That is why quiet seasons are not wasted seasons. They are preparation seasons. They are preparation seasons. They are the moments where God is equipping you for what you have been asking for, even if it does not look like it on the surface. Because preparation does not always feel productive. Growth does not always feel exciting. Sometimes it feels slow, repetitive, even frustrating. But that does not mean it is not happening. There are things being developed in you that cannot be rushed. There are lessons being taught that cannot be skipped. There are areas of your life that require time, attention, and intentionality. And quiet seasons provide the environment for that kind of development. It is also in these quiet seasons that your relationship with God is deepened. Because when everything else is stripped away, when the distractions are removed, when the noise fades, you are left with Him in a more intimate way. And that intimacy creates a different kind of connection, one that is not based on what He is doing for you, but on who He is to you. In the quiet, you learn how to trust without constant confirmation. You learn how to believe without immediate evidence. You learn how to remain steady even when things feel uncertain. And that kind of faith is not built in moments of constant activity. It is built in moments of stillness where you have to rely on what you know rather than what you see. Some of you have been trying to escape your quiet season. You have been looking for ways to speed it up, to move past it, to get back to a place where things feel more active, more visible, more exciting. But what if the very thing you are trying to rush through is the place where God is doing His most important work in your life? If the silence is not a sign that nothing is happening, but a sign that something is being carefully constructed? What if the stillness is not a delay, but a design? What if the lack of visible progress is actually protecting a process that needs time to develop without interference? Because not everything can be built in the spotlight. Not everything can be developed in the presence of constant attention. Some things require privacy. Some things require stillness. Some things require a level of focus that can only exist when the noise is removed. And if you can begin to see your quiet season from that perspective, it changes how you experience it. It shifts your mindset from frustration to expectation, from impatience to trust, from resistance to surrender. Because you begin to understand that even though things may look still on the outside, there is movement happening on the inside. You begin to notice the subtle changes, the way your thinking is evolving, the way your reactions are shifting, the way your priorities are becoming clearer, the way your focus is becoming sharper. These are not always dramatic changes, but they are significant. They are signs that something is being developed, something is being refined, something is being prepared. And over time, those internal shifts begin to manifest externally. The growth that started in the quiet begins to show up in your actions, in your decisions, in your direction. And when that happens, it often feels like things are suddenly coming together. Like doors are opening, like opportunities are aligning, like progress is accelerating. But what looks sudden on the outside is often the result of what was happening in the quiet all along. The discipline you were building, the clarity you were gaining, the strength you were developing. These are the things that create that momentum. So instead of resisting your quiet season, begin to lean into it. Begin to ask yourself, what is being revealed? What is being refined? What is being reshaped? Begin to see it not as a pause, but as a process. Not as an absence, but as an assignment. Because God does not waste seasons. He does not allow time to pass without purpose. Every moment, every experience, every phase of your life is being used in some way to shape you into who you are meant to become. And quiet seasons are no exception. They are often the places where the most important work is happening, even if it is the least visible. They are the spaces where you are being prepared for what is next, even if you cannot yet see what that is. They are the moments where your foundation is being strengthened, your faith is being deepened, your character is being refined. And while it may not always feel like progress, while it may not always look like movement, there is a depth to what is happening in your quiet season that cannot be measured by external standards, a depth that is shaping you in ways that will only become clear as you continue to move forward. A depth that is laying the groundwork for everything that is yet to come. Your growth will require separation, stillness, and obedience. And those three things will stretch you in ways you didn't expect, because they will ask you to release what feels familiar, to embrace what feels uncomfortable, and to trust what you cannot yet fully see. Growth is not just about gaining something new. It is often about letting go of what no longer aligns. And that process can feel like loss before it ever feels like progress. Separation is one of the first places where this becomes real. Because as you begin to evolve, as your mindset shifts, as your priorities change, you will start to notice that certain environments no longer feel the same. Certain conversations no longer resonate. Certain relationships no longer align with who you are becoming. And that realization can be difficult because it forces you to acknowledge that growth sometimes creates distance. Not all separation is dramatic. It does not always come with conflict or confrontation. Sometimes it is subtle. It is the quiet awareness that you are outgrowing a space, that you are no longer comfortable in patterns that once felt normal, that your energy is no longer aligned with what used to feel familiar. And in those moments, you are faced with a choice to remain in what is comfortable or to step into what is aligned. And that choice is not easy because staying often feels safer. It feels predictable. It allows you to avoid the discomfort of change, but growth does not happen in spaces that no longer challenge you. It does not happen in environments that keep you stagnant. It does not happen when you are constantly adjusting yourself to fit into places that no longer reflect who you are becoming. So separation becomes necessary, not as a form of rejection, but as a form of redirection. It is not about pushing people away. It is about creating space for your growth. It is about recognizing that not everyone is meant to go with you into every season of your life. Some people were part of your past, part of your learning, part of your foundation, but they are not part of your future. And that realization requires maturity because it means you have to let go without resentment. You have to move forward without needing everyone to understand your decision. You have to accept that growth will not always be convenient for others, and that is okay, but separation alone is not enough. Because once you step away from what no longer aligns, you enter into a space of stillness, a space where things may feel quiet, where there is less distraction, less noise, less external influence. And while that illness can feel unfamiliar, it is also where clarity begins to form. Stillness is where you begin to hear yourself more clearly. It is where you begin to recognize your own thoughts without the influence of others. It is where you begin to understand what you truly want, what you truly need, what you are truly called to pursue. And that understanding cannot be rushed. It requires time. It requires patience. It requires the willingness to sit with yourself without constantly seeking distraction. Because in stillness, there is nowhere to hide. There are no external voices to drown out your internal ones. There are no constant activities to keep you occupied. There is just you, your thoughts, your emotions, your questions. And while that can feel uncomfortable, it is also where transformation begins. It is in that stillness that God begins to reveal things to you. Not always in loud, dramatic ways, but in quiet impressions, in subtle shifts, in moments of clarity that come when you least expect them. And if you are not willing to be still, you will miss those moments. You will overlook the very insights that could guide you into your next season. Stillness also teaches you patience. Stillness also teaches you patience. It teaches you how to wait without becoming restless, how to trust without needing constant confirmation, how to remain grounded even when things are not moving as quickly as you would like. And that patience is essential because not everything in your life will happen on your timeline. There will be moments where you feel ready, where you feel prepared, where you feel like you should be further along than you are. But stillness reminds you that readiness is not just about your desire. It is about timing. It is about alignment. It is about being in the right place at the right time with the right foundation. And then comes obedience, the part of growth that requires you to act on what? You have learned to move in the direction that has been revealed, even when it does not make complete sense. Because it is one thing to gain clarity and stillness, but it is another thing to follow through on that clarity when it requires you to step outside of your comfort zone. Obedience is where faith becomes action. It is where you take what you have been shown and begin to apply it to your life. It is where you make decisions that align with your growth, even when those decisions are difficult. It is where you trust that what God is leading you toward is greater than what you are leaving behind. And obedience is not always convenient. It will ask you to do things that feel uncomfortable, to take steps that feel uncertain, to move forward without having all the answers. It will challenge your need for control. It will stretch your willingness to trust, but it is also what moves you from where you are to where you are meant to be. Because growth does not happen just because you understand something. It happens when you act on that understanding. It happens when you make the changes, when you take the steps, when you follow through on what has been revealed to you. And when you begin to walk in obedience, you will start to see things shift. Opportunities will begin to align. Doors will begin to open. Clarity will begin to increase. Not always immediately, not always in ways you expect, but in ways that confirm that you are moving in the right direction. But none of this happens without the willingness to go through the process, to embrace separation, even when it feels like loss, to lean into stillness, even when it feels uncomfortable, to walk in obedience, even when it feels uncomfortable, to walk in obedience, even when it feels uncertain. Because these are not just steps, they are transformations. They are the way your mindset shifts, the way your priorities change, the way your life begins to align with your purpose. And while each part of the process may feel challenging on its own, together they create a foundation for growth that is deep, that is lasting, that is meaningful. And as you move through this process, you begin to realize that growth is not just about where you end up. It is about who you become along the way. It is about the strength you develop, the clarity you gain, the discipline you build. It is about becoming a version of yourself that is more aligned, more focused, more intentional. And that version of you is not created overnight. It is shaped through moments of decision, through seasons of change, through experiences that challenge you to step beyond what is comfortable and into what is necessary. It is shaped through the willingness to let go, to be still, to obey. Because in the end, growth is not something that happens to you. It is something that happens through you as you choose alignment over comfort, purpose over familiarity, and faith over fear.